Matthews. Welcome to this program here at the wonderful Cafe Anyway, somewhere in
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Podcastro Valley today. And the program called
Mike's Daily Podcast.
It's Mike Matthews. This is my daily podcast, and I bring it to you every day. That's the name. Well, I try to do that. Sometimes I get a little bit off the train tracks, and it gets maxed out, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I think that I have to shout. Speaking of Max, there's Ava Max, and she...
Mike's Daily Podcast.
She had that song, all the kings and the queens on the throne, da 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 da. So my lovely lady friend,
Mike,
she had never heard that song before.
Daily
And she goes, hey,
Podcast.
isn't she ripping off Bon Jovi?
Yeah!
With that shot to the heart, and you're to blame. All the kings and the queens on the throne. I guess. But here we are. Cafe Anyway, you and I. There's a big old full moon out right now above Cafe Anyway. And no, I'm not talking about somebody who accidentally had an issue where their bum got out of their pants. That's not a good thing. Plumbers know what I mean. But at any rate, that happens sometimes. I also wanted to tell you, up in the wonderful town of Shasta that I went to, that we had a lot of fun. We met that horse that I told you about, Doc Happy, and I got really close. The horse's face was like right there. I've always been afraid of horses' faces. Of course, you also want to keep an eye out for their hooves, because that could do some damage. And if they back up on you or fall on you or something, or you fall off them, there's a lot of danger involved with a horse. But they're beautiful creatures. They're wonderful. But their heads are just enormous. And I've always been afraid of getting thwacked by a horse head. If it, like he turned suddenly and said, "You said what?" And then bam, it hits you in the head. That hurts, I would imagine.
And here's today's podcast picture.
Concussion time and all that. Oh, the podcast picture most definitely will be from that trip from last week. Why don't we go back to a week ago and the beautiful lake that we visited, the Castle Lake. I was so thirsty that day. After that walk, we ended up going to the headwaters, the Sacramento River, and all the water that feeds all the length of California starts at the headwaters there in Mount Shasta. That's right, the late great Basil the Boxer. Well, he was almost there. He was there, but he was quite old at that point and had to stay in the car. And I couldn't carry him the whole way because his legs had basically the dog, the equivalent to ALS for dogs, unfortunately. And he could kind of walk if I held up his back legs using a harness. But yes, he was kind of there, and he was with us this past weekend in spirit. But I'll post you. How about that? I'll go to mikesdailypodcast.com and post a picture from the trip last week. I think it'll be of Castle Lake. It's a beautiful view, or possibly of yours truly in the picture from Castle Lake. We might even do that. I sent it to a friend of mine. I sent that picture in Alabama. I was thinking of some great friends that I had in Alabama, because my lovely lady friend and I today, we were cooking this amazing, huge apple, I guess it's an apple turnover. I'm not sure exactly the name, but it involved egg whites. It was kind of like a little cake, like a breakfast pancake, but you make it in one big piece in a pan. It's a cake, and I've got so many apples in my backyard now. These apples adopted my backyard, just like that cat Patches has adopted us. And so when life gives you apples, you make apple turnover cake. Or I put it in my smoothies and make this delicious apple smoothie with lots of cinnamon in it. But yes, caramelizing onions that's wonderful. But caramelizing apples is amazing as well, completely different thing you're going for, of course. But horse, there's a horse. But not in the podcast picture today. But here is something I learned about, speaking of podcast pictures, apparently there is an art to putting a good podcast picture together. And this came from Anchor.fm, and Mike's Daily Podcast is featured on Anchor.fm. You can find a link at mikesdailypodcast.com. But let's say you would like to start a podcast. You need to define your podcast visual identity. Before designing your cover art, it's important to do a little soul searching to figure out what your podcast is all about. Your cover art should be visually pleasing, but it should also accurately represent your podcast's overall message and brand. Like, for example, do you talk about Doctor Who? You'll need a TARDIS in your little picture. And a week ago, before we left Mount Shasta, we stopped at the local grocery store. I think it's called Berryville Grocery Store. And I walk in and I'm wearing a Doctor Who shirt, which you can see in the podcast picture at mikesdailypodcast.com. And as I'm walking in, I suddenly hear the theme song to Doctor Who. Very iconic theme. People who haven't even watched a show, they know the theme song from Doctor Who. It has been in existence since 1963. And it was actually partially produced by a woman who was a magician using all sorts of different tapes. And she basically used different tapes to create the sound that you hear in the song. And it's very otherworldly. And when it came out in the 60s, it was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? The basic theme, I forget the guy's name, as we go outside a cafe anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley. Look at that moat! Podcastro Valleyton, the last place on earth. He had also done the theme song to The Prisoner, a bunch of other British shows, but oh my gosh, iconic. So, I am walking into this grocery store. I hear the theme song. I'm like, did I just imagine that? And I walk around with my lovely lady friend. We're purchasing things. We're seeing the amazing cast of characters that make up the customers that frequent this grocery store. Some people from out of town because it's a tourist destination, Mount Shasta. And then you've got your people that are the Mount Shastians. And then you got your people that are more not exactly Mount Shasta residents, but they live there anyway. And their hair is pretty interesting and big. The word nest comes to mind. Their hairs on their heads are huge nests of some sort. Maybe these birds live in their hair. I don't know. The birds chirping outside a cafe anyway. However, when we were checking out our stuff that we were leaving the place and paying for it, I hear the song again, and I look over. It's the cashier, the guy at the cash register. He's wearing a mask, and I can't see that he's whistling, but I can hear him. And I go, "It's you, isn't it?" And he laughs. I go, "Who's your favorite Doctor?" He said, "David Tennant." And David Tennant is supposed to be coming back for some big 60th anniversary episode. So there's a lot of talk about the trailer that came out recently showing a little bit of Jodie Whittaker's Doctor starting to regenerate. And that's a big thing. And I'm not going to go into that thing because I'm talking about the artwork for your podcast. Let's say you want to make and do a podcast. What are you going to do? How would you describe your podcast? Make a list of keywords. Okay, for Mike's Daily Podcast, let's see. Daily. It's a podcast. It's Mike. There's a restaurant. It's random stuff. A little bit rambly. A little bit artistic. Different.
Right? Good.
Pop culture news, helpful advice, helpful things. There's a lot making up this podcast. That's why I don't have any listeners. I don't narrow it down and nail it down and make it more niche. Then form your elevator pitch. Oh, I hate that. I hate that terminology. Hey, give me the 30-second pitch. How would you define it if you were in an elevator with me and I'm about to get off? Try defining your podcast in 1 or 2 sentences in order to really hone in on your idea. What's your target podcast audience? What community or interest group aligns with your niche? There's that word again. What makes your podcast... What other podcasts inspire you, in other words? What makes your podcast special and different from others? What podcasts inspire you? What do you like about their cover art? And here you go. Is your podcast for your brand or your business? How will those professional elements factor into your podcast brand? After you've considered these defining characteristics for your podcast, you can integrate them into your podcast image. All right. That sounds simple enough. How about this? How about defining your niche? Knowing what makes your podcast unique will help you identify who it will appeal to. What will your topic be? Why am I starting this podcast? What am I interested in or curious about? What can I talk about at length and long term? What am I uniquely suited to talk about? When you land on a topic, go deeper to further develop your niche. What are some episode ideas that you have that other similar podcasts that have not covered? What will your signature style and tone be? What format will you use? Will it be interview based? Solo monologue style? Yay! Co-hosting with one or multiple partners? That's ridiculous. That's dumb. Hey, look who's outside a cafe anyway. Hello, Michael Master. It's Madame Rootabega, and I like being on your podcast. Oh, yes. You know, it's a good thing that this podcast is one of those podcasts that welcomes other people to co-host with me. That is right, Michael Master, and I don't know what the podcast is. Oh. Do you like Mount Shasta? Yes. Do you like Doctor Who? Yes. Do you like interview-style podcasts? No. No interview-based. No, get those interview-based podcasts out of here. Are you going to answer listeners' calls or emails? Of course. Of course I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. That's what it just asked me here in this article. You can always ask me questions at 336MM Daily. 3 plus 3 equals 6. MM is in Mike Matthews. Daily isn't what this podcast is. Or tries to be.
That's enough. Put down the mic.
And this article also asks, tells you to do your market research, design an audience persona, be adaptable to changing audiences, ready and be ready to record. Okay, here's the thing. David Gilmour, guitarist for Pink Floyd, the one who discovered Kate Bush, he once said, do not try and basically do all this stuff that they're talking about here. Don't do your market research. Don't design an audience persona. Don't be adaptable to changing audiences. None of that. Be yourself. You be you. He said, it is absolutely ridiculous when these groups, when these bands, when these artists are just trying to pursue a sound. When they're not being themselves, when they're not being artistic, when they're doing it all for the buck, that's when it's bad. When you're doing it for yourself, when you're doing it with the vision that you have in mind, that's when it's good. That's when people respect you. I'm not saying I'm some groundbreaking, hey, look at this artistic podcaster guy who's doing it all, his way or whatever. I borrow from this and that, but I'm doing what I like to do. And I think that's all that's important. It also mentions here how to put music in your podcast, which I would never do. Hey, coming up, we've got this segment called the Mike Matthews New Tunes Feud. Oh, I guess I'm putting music in my podcast. Look who else is here.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Mike, it's great when you have co-hosts on your podcast day, like us.
Yeah, us! Do you know that? Yes, I do know that, and that's why we hang out outside of Cafe Anyway and talk to you. Hey, while we're out here, I think it would be a great idea if we did the wonderful segment that I've been doing on this show now for a couple weeks, and that is called the No, wait, that's not what it's called. It's called Let's Go Back with Matthews. And last podcast, I told you about that the very, 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 very first podcast I did, first time I tried to be a DJ. The first time I tried to be a DJ was in 1987. I had graduated from high school in 86. I was interning at a radio station called Q105 in Oxnard, California, where apparently Casey Kasem had spent some time when he was getting started. I was interning there. I just learned a little bit here and there about recording music. Back then they were recording songs onto what they called carts, and you would play all your music and commercials off of carts. Think of a 8-track player. If you don't know what that is, think of just tape playing inside of a tiny little plastic box type thing. I got all excited. Now I sound like I'm a guy from that bets on horses. I don't know. I sounded Gilbert Gottfriedian. But here's the thing, the late great Gilbert Gottfried. Here's the thing. So you needed someone to record all your songs on there. So they kind of taught me that. And they gave me records for coming in. So I was getting paid with records and free Pepsi, cans of Pepsi, and whatever else Pepsi made. They had it all in little coolers. Hey, grab one of those, Mike, before you go. Thanks. Bye. Suddenly they shut down their internship program. Something happened weird. Probably some teenager like myself had done something untowards. So the whole internship program got shut down. I then found Y97, and they needed someone to help organize all their records, to help do a little bit of research. We would call people and play them little bits of songs and find out what they liked. I don't know if that's legal, but they did it, and they didn't pay us for it either, by the way. I think I maybe got a CD or a cassette or a record once in a while from there. But I said, hey, I want to get on the air. What do I need to do? And this guy, great guy named Michael Newman, he said to me, hey, what you need to do is go in that recording studio there, which we use for commercials, to make commercials. There's 2 turntables in there and a microphone, and you need to try and make yourself an air check, a demo tape, so I can get an idea of what you sound like. So I tried to do that. And I was telling you about that last podcast. But here actually is that tape. I found that tape recently. I know. Unbelievable. So I'm going to play you a little bit of that.
With a better mix of music, we're Y97. When you hear The Time of My Life by Bill Medley and Jennifer Warnes, be caller number 19 at 965-9797. You'll automatically win 2 LPs from Jody Watley, The Cover Girls, Belinda Carlisle, or the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. It's a Christmas double album pack instant winner weekend from your Y97.
Aw, I think I was, how old? I might have been 20, 19 or 20 there. But see, the last podcast, I played you a little bit of an old tape, actually when I was finally on the air, and I was trying to mess with my voice. I was trying to, I wasn't following David Gilmour's advice. I didn't do the UBU thing. I was trying to be someone else, and I was trying to put my voice like this, because everybody else sounded like this. It's terrible. All right, one more. Billy Idol. Aw, he's still around. That's awesome. Here's Mike. Maybe.
Y97 and Mike Matthews. Here's a brand new song from Maureen McGovern, and I Could Have Been a Sailor, on your Y97.
Maureen McGovern. Why did I have a record? I had a single from Maureen McGovern. I don't think that song went anywhere, but that's why they gave it to me. That, hey, make a tape air check out of it. There you go. Let's go back with Matthews, and let's go do the last segment here on Mike's Daily Podcast. Oh my, it's almost 7:30. I gotta get this wrapped up because I gotta get out of here. Okay, here we go. I have had, and I had something from Winky. Winky sent me an email to mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. Hopefully I can get to that in the next podcast. But here, okay, why do they keep sending me stuff from Puppy Angst? I keep getting stuff from Puppy Angst. Enough with the Puppy Angst. Quit sending me stuff, Puppy Angst. However, we have not played anything by Windows Gold. What's Windows Gold? Okay, this is called Little by little.
All the wrong things I'm too good at, like the pain that I bring, who wouldn't run from that?
Wow, Windows Gold. Her voice kind of crackles. That's interesting. I like her voice crackles. Like Kai Rizdal at Marketplace. Hey everybody, it's Kai Rizdal in Marketplace. Hey, you ever wondered what it's going to take for the economy to get turned around? Let's go. Right, we got the numbers coming up. That meant something to somebody, but probably not the majority. But you know what? That doesn't matter because I don't care. I didn't do my market research. I don't know what my audience is, and I don't care. You're my audience, and that's all that matters. So there you go. That was a group called Windows Gold. And now I'm going to play for you another song of Rich Corinthian Leather by Drew Holcomb and the New Neighbors. I think I interviewed Drew back when I did a boring interview-based podcast. Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors. Okay, let's see. They have a new song, and it is going to play for you in a moment. They decided to, instead of just make it easy for me to play it for you, I would have to go through several different windows.
What have we got to lose? We'll never get back the time we borrowed. What have we got to lose? I know we can make it till tomorrow.
Oh, that's nice. So, which one do you like better? Windows Gold or Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors? You can call me at 336-MM Daily. That's 3 + 3 = 6. MM is the Mike Matthews Daily, as in what this podcast tries to be and has been for a couple of days. Or you can email me, mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. And that's right. That was the Mike Matthews New Tunes Feud. Duking it out. Hey, and I also notice here that Carpetbagger has an update about how he's not making money off of YouTube anymore. Shall we listen?
You know, if this can be fixed, is it going to be a while? Because, you know, Halloween season is a big deal for me on my channel. I'm uploading a lot of content that's timely, content that ages like pumpkins, that you got to get it out there when it's fresh. Otherwise, it's just, it's not relevant. If I'm uploading haunted houses in the middle of November, people aren't going to be as interested. So I was worried because it shows me that what I'm doing on this YouTube channel is making a difference, no matter how small, is making a difference in people's lives, and that means the world to me. So thank you so much. So should be some new content out tomorrow. I got a lot of content coming out.
Okay, I guess it got monetized. He has something like 4,000. Oh, it did get fixed. Wow. He has, so that little video he just did, about 10 minutes long, had 22,000 views. I don't think a single podcast of mine has ever gotten that high. Maybe got 22 views, but 22,000, oh my gosh. Must be nice. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, John Deere the engineer, and for more ways to reach me, it's A. Frank.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!
And that was episode 2503, 2503. Catch past podcasts at my website, mikesdailypodcast.com.